Montana Territory, 1882. Mira Gallagher was running, her worn boots kicked up dry dust as she fled across the parched ground behind the barn, her breath sharp in her throat. The sun was low but still hot, casting long shadows across the prairie. She did not look back. She did not need to. She knew the sound of his boots. Heavy. Angry. Her stepfather. She gripped the folded envelope in her hand tighter, her mother's will, found hidden beneath the floorboards of the sewing room just this morning. It was proof. Her stepfather had no claim over her, no rights to the land, no power over anything. He had married her mother 2 years ago, and now that her mother was buried on the hill behind the church, he thought Mira belonged to him too. She burst past the fence line, lungs burning, heart racing toward the only person she could trust, Zane Prescott. Zane had been her neighbor since she was 15. He had come up from Texas with his younger brother and a pack mule, building his homestead one fence post at a time. He was quiet, sharp-eyed, and carried a steadiness in him that never wavered. He had always watched out for her, helped mend the Gallagher fence more than once, and brought over flour and salt when the winters grew mean. But he had never crossed a line. Until last week, when her stepfather tried to drag her to the county office to sign papers giving him full control of the land, and Zane stepped between them. "She ain't yours," Zane had said, voice calm but cold. "You have no blood claim and no right." He had taken a punch to the jaw for that, but he did not back down. Mira had not stopped thinking about him since. Now she stumbled up the path to his cabin, gasping. She banged on the door with both fists. It opened fast. "Mira," Zane's voice was low and tight. He stepped aside, letting her tumble in. "What happened?" "He knows," she panted, leaning against the wall. "He knows I found the will. He tried to lock me in the cellar, said I was his now." Zane's jaw clenched. "You hurt?" "No." "But she held out the envelope. "It's all here. My mother left everything to me. He was never supposed to have anything." Zane took the paper, scanned it quick, then looked up. "Then you are coming with me now. You are not going back there." She looked down at her hands. "He will come." "He will not stop." Zane reached for his hat, then his rifle. "Let him come. You are safe here." Her chest tightened with relief, but the fear still sat deep. "He says he can take me, legally." Zane paused, then looked her in the eye. "He is not your blood." "I know." He stepped closer. "Then marry me." She blinked. "What? Today, right now? We ride to the preacher and make it law. If he tries to take you again, I will stand in front of him and say it plain. You are not his. You are my wife." Mira's lips parted. "You mean that?" Zane was not a man who said things he did not mean. His eyes held steady on hers, and something in her heart cracked open. She nodded. "I do." They rode for the church in silence, the wind tugging at her hair and skirt. Zane's horse moved steady beneath her, hers barely keeping pace. When they reached the little white chapel outside town, the preacher was sweeping the steps. "Reverend," Zane said, climbing down, "we need a quiet ceremony. Now." The man raised a brow but saw Mira's face and nodded. "Come inside." The vows were simple. Zane's hand wrapped around hers, firm and warm. When he spoke the words, he did not falter. And when he said, "I do," Mira felt something shift in her chest, like she had stepped into sunlight after years of cold. The preacher placed his hand over theirs. "By the power vested in me by the state of Montana, I declare you husband and wife." Zane looked at her. "You are mine now." Mira's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. They rode back under the gold-streaked sky. When they reached his cabin, Zane helped her down slow, as if she might break. He did not kiss her, not yet, just held her hand as they walked inside. "I will sleep on the floor," he said, setting out a blanket. "You take the bed." "You do not have to, I know." He looked at her. "But I want you to feel safe." She nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." That night, Mira lay in his bed, listening to the wind through the cracks in the wall. She watched the shape of him by the hearth, quiet and still. And for the first time in a long time she felt safe. But safety did not last long. The next morning her stepfather came. He rode up angry, his voice loud before he even reached the door. "Mira, you get out here now, you stole from me." Zane opened the cabin door and stepped outside, calm. Mira stood just behind him. "She is not yours," Zane said. "She is my wife's daughter," her stepfather snarled. "That makes her mine." "No," Zane raised the marriage paper. "She is my wife now, you have no claim." The man's face twisted. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" Zane stepped off the porch. "She is not your blood, you do not own her. If you try to touch her again, I will put you in the ground." Mira stood tall behind him. "Leave, or I will send the sheriff your way with proof of what you tried to do." Her stepfather glared, but something in Zane's stance must have warned him. He spat in the dirt, then turned his horse. "I will be back." Zane watched him go, then turned to Mira. "You are safe now," he said. She stepped forward. "You really meant it, did you not, about wanting me?" Zane nodded once. "I did." Mira reached for his hand. "Then I am yours, not just because of a paper, but because I want to be." Zane's hand tightened around hers. "Then come here." She stepped into his arms, and when he kissed her, it was soft and sure. There was no fear left between them now, only something strong and real, growing like roots deep in the earth. 2 days passed before Mira spoke more than a few sentences at a time. Not out of fear her stepfather hadn't returned, but because quiet seemed easier than trying to untangle everything inside her. She spent most of those hours tending to small things, sweeping out the corners of the lean-to, brushing down the mule, boiling water for washing. Zane didn't hover. He worked the fence line and hauled water from the creek, letting her find her pace. But he watched her, and she felt it not like a man waiting for something owed, but like a man waiting for something to heal. On the third morning, she sat beside him on the porch as he sharpened a drawknife. The sky was low with cloud, and the scent of pine hung heavy from the last night's rain. "You built all this yourself?" she asked, nodding toward the outbuildings and the corral beyond. Zane didn't look up. "My brother helped me start it. He's down in Idaho now. Married a woman with 4 boys. Must have gone soft. You miss him, miss the quiet more now that it's gone." Mira tucked her hands beneath her thighs, watching a blackbird wobble along the fence rail. "I don't remember ever having quiet, not the kind that feels like it'll stay." Zane set the knife aside. "You'll have it here. For as long as you want." She turned toward him. "And if I want more than quiet," his jaw shifted, but he didn't look away. "Then say it plain." She did. "I want to know what you believe about me, not for protection, but for who I am." Zane didn't answer right away. He stood, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stepped down into the yard. Mira followed. He led her behind the cabin to a patch of earth tilled into tight rows. Beans and squash had already pushed through the spring soil, and the cabbage heads were curling tight. "Most folks don't know this is here," he said. "When I first came, I planted without knowing the ground. First season, nothing took. Next year I listened, dug deeper, used ash from the fire, turned the soil before snow." Mira looked at the rows. "So you learned it." "I listened to what the land needed, didn't just take what I wanted." She looked at him, heart rising slow. "Is that your answer?" Zane rolled up his sleeves. "It's what I know how to do. You're not a burden, Mira. You're not a problem to solve or a mouth to feed. You're a woman with roots of her own. All I'm saying is I've got the patience to learn where they go." She stepped close, the scent of damp earth between them. "Then teach me the things you know, and I'll teach you the things I carry." He nodded once. That was all. By week's end, she was patching the barn roof beside him, hands blistered and face sunburnt. She never asked to be spared the hard work, and he never offered. But when she reached too far and her boot slipped on the beam, he caught her wrist and held her steady. "You're not falling," he said. She didn't. That night she laid her sewing aside and sat at the table while he smoked his pipe near the stove. "Will you tell me how your mother died?" he asked without looking up. Mira traced the grain in the wood with her fingertip. "Fever. Took her in 2 days. She tried to hide it, thinking she could push through. She was always trying to make things easier for me." Zane nodded. "And your father, shot outside Dodge when I was 6. Killed over a spilled drink and a crooked card. Mama never spoke his name after." Zane tapped out his pipe. "I won't ever lie to you, Mira. Sometimes this life will bruise us anyway, but I won't be the one to do it." She met his eyes across the table. "I believe you." He stood and crossed the space between them, slow and deliberate. When he reached her, he didn't take her face in his hands or press his mouth to hers. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the steadiness of his breath. "I won't take more than you offer," he said. She placed her hand over his heart. "Then I'll give it freely." When he kissed her, it was with the same care he used when mending his saddle or carving a handle measured, sure, and meant to last. The next morning she woke curled beside him, his arm heavy across her waist, the window glowing with dawn. Outside, the world was still. No hoofbeats, no threats, just birdsong and the rustle of wind through cedar. She rose, pulled on her boots, and stepped into the new day. The ash bin needed emptying and the cow hadn't been milked yet. But she didn't mind. This was her home now, and she was not running anymore. By early June, Mira had memorized the rhythm of the land. The fields needed weeding before the sun climbed too high, and the chickens had taken to nesting in the tall grass behind the smokehouse. Zane slaughtered a hog the first week and cured the meat in salt, and she helped with the scraping and packing. Her hands grew accustomed to the work, her body to the ache, her mind to the stillness that followed each day's labor. One afternoon, she stood beneath the cottonwood trimming strips of cloth for quilting when a rider appeared on the rise. Not her stepfather this time. This man wore a deputy's badge and rode with the hesitance of someone sent to deliver unwanted news. Zane met him near the corral, wiping his hands on a rag. "Prescott," the deputy called. Zane nodded. "What's it about?" The man dismounted, set his hat under his arm. "Gallagher filed a petition with the county judge. Claims he's owed compensation for Mira's upkeep, says she was under his guardianship when she left." Mira stepped forward, cloth still in her hand. "He's trying to twist the law. My mother left me everything." The deputy shifted. "I don't make the rulings, ma'am." But Judge Maynard scheduled a hearing in 3 weeks' time, down in Miles City. Zane's voice stayed low. "He's pushing this to draw her back into his hold." The deputy gave a slow nod. "He's not the first man to try it, and he won't be the last." "But you've got a marriage certificate and a signed will. Bring both." Zane took the paper the deputy handed him, folded it once. "We'll be there." After the man rode off, Mira sat on the porch steps and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I thought marrying you would end it," she said quietly. "But he's still reaching." Zane crouched beside her, arms resting on his thighs. "He's reaching because he's losing." She looked at him. "What if the judge sides with him?" "He won't. But if he did, I'd still fight it. Every way I know how." She didn't speak for a while, watching the clouds shift above the barn. Then softly, "I don't want to be dragged through court like I'm something to be bartered." "You won't be," Zane said. "You'll walk in as a woman who made her own choice. And I'll sit beside you." That night, she packed away her mother's will in a tin box and wrapped the marriage certificate in oilcloth. Zane found a clean shirt and shaved the scruff from his jaw. Neither spoke of the hearing again for several days, but it sat between them like a stone at the bottom of a creek, unmoved but always there. Days passed. They planted more beans. Zane repaired the roof of the henhouse. Mira stitched new sleeves onto his work shirt. One morning, she woke before him and watched the slow rise and fall of his chest, the crease between his brows even in sleep. She reached out and smoothed it with her fingertip. He opened his eyes, caught her hand in his. "You always wake this early." "Only when my heart's full and won't quiet." He kissed her wrist, then her palm. "What's it full of?" She smiled faintly. "You, the cabin, the scent of coffee in the next room, things I never thought I'd have." He rolled to his side, still holding her hand. "You ever think about what comes next?" She hesitated. "I think about the garden growing tall, about buying a second milk cow, about whether I'll be enough for you when the hard seasons come." "You already are." Mira let out a quiet breath. "I think about children sometimes, not in a rush, but someday." Zane traced a line up her arm. "Someday sounds just right." The day they rode into Miles City, the sky bloomed with summer heat. Mira wore her mother's brooch pinned to her collar. Zane rode beside her, silent but steady, his rifle strapped across the saddle. They stabled the horses and walked side by side to the courthouse. Inside, the judge sat behind a desk worn down at the corners. Gallagher stood with his hat clenched tight, eyes darting from Mira to the paper in his hand. The judge adjusted his spectacles. "Mr. Gallagher claims he provided for Miss Gallagher after the passing of her mother. He seeks compensation." Mira stepped forward. "My mother left me the land, the livestock, everything. He kept that hidden. He locked me in the house and tried to force me to sign it over." The judge turned to Zane. "And you," Zane handed over the marriage certificate. "She's my wife. She came to me of her own will." Gallagher's voice scraped like gravel. "She was mine to care for. I fed her, clothed her. She owed me loyalty." "She owes you nothing," Zane said evenly. "You tried to own her." "That's not the same as care." The judge studied the documents, then looked to Mira. "You have the original will." She stepped forward and placed it on the desk. The judge read in silence. Then he leaned back, thumb brushing his jaw. "This is clear. The land belongs to Mrs. Prescott. There is no legal debt owed Mr. Gallagher. Case dismissed." Gallagher's face twisted, but he said nothing. Mira met his eyes once, then turned her back and walked out with Zane beside her. Outside, the sun was bright. The street bustled with wagons and shopkeepers calling their wares, but all Mira heard was her breath, steady and free. Zane placed a hand on her back. "It's done." She nodded, eyes damp but unblinking. "It's really done." They rode home slow, not talking much, the wind tugging strands of her hair loose from her braid. By the time the cabin came into view, the sky had turned gold. That evening she stood by the stove, stirring beans while Zane carved a handle for the new hoe. She turned to him. "I don't want to wait on someday anymore." He looked up. "I want it now. I want to build that life, with children, with you, with something that lasts." Zane rose, crossed the room, and took her face in both hands. "Then let's start it." And when he kissed her, it was with no hesitation, no fear. Just truth. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, but inside, all was still and whole and home. By mid-July, the prairie had turned brittle at the edges. Grass curled in on itself, and the cattle stood long hours in the shade of cottonwoods, tails twitching slow. Mira moved through the heat like she'd been born to it, sleeves rolled high, hair twisted up with a bone pin Zane had carved for her from mule antler. She'd taken to riding out with him each morning, checking the southern fence line where the posts leaned and the wire sagged. That morning, they'd found a buck tangled in the lower wire. Its leg was bloodied but not broken. Zane worked the pliers while Mira kept her hand on the animal's neck, murmuring low until it stilled. "Could have died out here like that," she said as the buck limped off, favoring its hind leg. "Most do," Zane said, coiling the slack wire. But not today. They rode back around the long ridge where wild lupine still bloomed in the shadowed places. Mira kept her eyes on the horizon, where the line of cottonwoods marked the creek bed. She hadn't spoken much since they left the courthouse 3 weeks earlier, and Zane hadn't pressed. It wasn't silence born of distance, it was something else, like she was listening for a sound she hadn't heard yet. That evening, she stood beside the corral, arms folded against the dusk chill. Zane was oiling the hinges on the gate when she finally spoke. "I saw a woman in town," she said. "Near the mercantile. She had 2 little ones hanging off her skirts and a bruise along her jaw." Zane set the oil can on the fence post. "What did she say to you?" "She didn't. Her husband came out and grabbed her by the elbow, pulled her along like she wasn't even there." Zane waited. "She looked at me when she passed, just for a second, like she was asking something I didn't know how to answer." Mira turned toward him. "I used to think being safe just meant being away from him, but it's more than that. It's knowing I won't ever be handled like I'm a thing to be kept. That if I speak, I'll be heard." Zane didn't move from where he stood, but his voice was steady. "And if you ever feel I fail at that, you tell me. I'll listen." "I know," she said. "That's why I married you." She stepped closer, the dry grass whispering beneath her boots. "I want to open the north room, the one you've been using for storage." "For what?" "I want to make space for someone else, if they ever need it. That woman in town, she's not the only one." Zane looked at her for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "We'll clear it tomorrow." They did. The next morning, they hauled out crates of rusted tools, stacks of old tack, and a barrel of spoiled oats. Mira swept the floor clean, then washed the windows while Zane built a simple cot from spare slats and rope. She stitched a quilt from their scrap pile, her needle moving in tight, even strokes. He watched her sometimes, not saying a word. That night after supper, she unpinned her hair and sat beside him on the porch. The moon was rising, full and pale, casting silver across the fields. "You ever think about the day we met?" she asked. "You were hauling a sack of flour across a footbridge that was half rotted through. I thought you'd fall through the boards." "I nearly did," she said, laughing softly. "You offered to carry the sack, but I wouldn't let you. You said I may be small, but I'm not delicate. I didn't want anyone thinking I needed saving." Zane leaned back against the post. "You didn't. You just needed someone to walk beside you." Mira turned her face toward the stars. "I've been thinking of writing to the minister's wife in Miles City, starting something quiet, just letters, a way for women to reach out if they need to." Zane nodded. "You've got the room now." She reached for his hand. "And the man." He laced his fingers through hers. "You've got more than that. You've got a life that's yours." They sat that way until the chill deepened and the coyotes began calling from the hills. When they went inside, Mira paused at the doorway to the north room. The cot was made, the quilt folded neat, a basin and pitcher set on the table. It was only a room, but it held the promise of something hard-earned and quietly powerful. As she climbed into bed, Zane drew the quilt over them both and pulled her close, the scent of pine still in his shirt. She pressed her cheek against his chest. "Someday," she whispered, "they'll say we built something here." Zane ran his hand down her back, slow and steady. "Let them say it, we'll still be here living it." August arrived with long streaks of heat and the steady whine of insects thick in the air. The pasture grasses leaned yellow now, dry enough to snap beneath a boot heel, and Mira had taken to carrying her canteen whenever she walked the land. Zane spent his mornings digging a second well near the barn, the old one too shallow to serve the livestock through the dry stretch ahead. Most evenings, they sat on the porch with their boots off and their feet in a basin of cool water, saying little and meaning much. One morning before dawn, Mira woke with a dull ache in her belly. and a sense of something shifting beneath her skin. She lay still, listening to the soft rasp of Zane's breath beside her. The feeling passed, but it left behind a quiet certainty she didn't yet have words for. She rose without waking him, lit the stove, and stirred cornmeal into boiling water before stepping out to gather eggs. By the time the sun crested the ridge, Mira had finished her chores and was scrubbing her hands at the pump when Zane came around the house holding a folded piece of paper. "Ryder came early," he said, handing it to her. "From the Reverend's wife." Mira wiped her hands on her apron before taking it. She opened the letter slowly, scanning it once. "She knows 2 women, one with a child. They'll need a place by month's end." Zane nodded. "We'll be ready." Mira folded the letter again, tucking it into her apron. "The cot will be too narrow for 2. I'll need to sew a second quilt. I'll build a wider frame." She studied him for a moment, then stepped close. "You don't say much when I bring these things up." "You don't need my permission," Zane said, "just my help." "You've got both." Later that day, they rode into town for seed and lamp oil. Mira spent time with the Reverend's wife, sorting through bolts of calico and setting aside a tin of lye soap for the women expected to arrive. Zane bartered with the blacksmith for a new hand auger, his old one having split at the handle. They ate lunch beneath the cottonwoods behind the mercantile, sharing slices of dried apple and strips of cold ham wrapped in paper. On the ride home, Mira leaned back in her saddle and looked at the peaks in the distance, their edges softened by a haze of heat. "I think I'm with child," she said quietly. Zane didn't answer right away. He reined in his horse and waited for her to draw even with him. The wind tugged at the ends of her shawl, and she saw the way his gaze fixed gently on her face. "Are you frightened?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I thought I might be, but I'm not." Zane reached over and took the reins from her hands, tying them to his saddle horn. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. "I'll build a cradle," he said. That night, Mira stood in the doorway of the north room, picturing the women who would come. She could see them setting their satchels down, washing the dust from their faces, sleeping without fear for the first time in too long. She moved to the table and ran her fingers over the folded quilt, the stitching careful and tight, each thread chosen with purpose. Zane joined her, resting his hand on hers. "You've made it a home." "We both did." They walked back to their room together. Mira sat on the bed and unpinned her hair, letting it fall down her back. Zane knelt and removed her boots, setting them side by side near the trunk. When he looked up, she reached for him, her fingers brushing over the calluses on his palm, the ones earned from building her a life. "I never thought peace could feel like this," she said. Zane's eyes met hers, steady as always. "It's not peace unless it's built with both hands." She pulled him to her, and they lay together in the quiet, the breeze lifting the curtains and the scent of sage drifting in from the dark. Weeks passed. The women came, one with a baby wrapped tight in a shawl. Mira welcomed them with stew and clean linens. Zane carried in their bundles and fixed the jammed latch on the window. No one asked questions. No one needed to. The summer gave way to cooler air, and the first frost settled on the edges of the pasture. Mira's belly began to swell, slow and sure. Zane added a second shelf to the pantry and reinforced the north fence before the ground hardened. They worked side by side, sharing the hours without needing to fill them. On a morning in late October, the first snow fell light and dry, dusting the roof in white. Mira sat by the fire, mending a tear in Zane's coat, while the baby from the north room slept in a basket by her feet. Zane came in with his arms full of firewood, stamping snow from his boots. "Ground's holding," he said. "We'll bring the cattle in tomorrow." Mira set her stitching aside and stood slowly, one hand on her back. "And the cradle's ready," made it extra wide. Just in case, she smiled. We'll fill it. That night, as snow fell quiet outside, Mira and Zane sat at the table, hands joined over a bowl of stew. The fire crackled low, and the scent of cedar filled the room. Mira looked across at the man who had never once raised his voice, never once taken more than she offered, never once made her feel smaller than she was. "I love you," she said, the words soft but certain. Zane's hand tightened over hers. "I've loved you since the first time you turned me down on that bridge." She laughed, the sound warm and full. "I was stubborn, you still are, and you still stay, always." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, brushing snow from the branches. Inside, the warmth held fast, and the light didn't flicker. Years later, they would tell their children how the cabin grew room by room, how the well never ran dry, how the land listened when you treated it right. They would speak of the women who came and went, each leaving stronger than she arrived. And they would speak of that long summer when everything began, when a man and a woman chose each other not out of rescue or need, but out of respect and love that deepened like roots through stone. And they would still be here, together, always,